Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. If you're watching the video, you already know what it is, and I'm going to give Sam his official full intro once we get later on into the show. But Sam the Albuquerque joining me in place for Justin this week. Justin's on some family time, but we got a whole lot going on in the first round, so we are going to go through all the series. Basically, every series is 3 games in at this point. A couple of lingering ones, but we're going to talk a little bit of initial impressions, go west, go east, and kind of bounce back and forth, but with all these series. But of course, we do have to start with the latest and our warm-up jumper, the latest news, and that Nick Nurse is officially out as the head coach of the Toronto Raptors. We are recording this on a Saturday afternoon. This was not a Friday news dump, because I think they had it pretty early. They didn't try to do it at 5 p.m. and you hold the whole press conference with Masai Ujiri explaining it, but this was something that had kind of been floated a little bit. There were rumors that it seemed like it was going to be almost a mutual last out. The Raptors did, of course, get into the play-in game and then lost. So, maybe a little bit of a bitter pill after losing to Chicago as well and not getting the chance to play for the 8th seed. But, regardless, this is a guy who also won a title with the Raptors in 2019, a previous coach of the year. So, you don't imagine him to stay on the market so long. But, I mean, I don't know, Sam, how do you feel about this? Like, the Raptors are definitely at a crossroads for sure, it feels like, with having to make a lot of decisions on their players. There are a lot of guys still here from this core of the 2019 team that are getting a little bit older. Obviously a pretty big regression from last year where, go for the 5 seed to losing in the play-in position. What do you think? I don't know. I guess it feels mutual, but do you feel like this is the right idea long-term? Like, wouldn't you kind of want him a little bit if you're rebuilding, or do you think maybe he just doesn't want to rebuild?
My thing is that I blame Masai Ujiri more than anything. Is Masai's been trying to do this half rebuild, half retool kind of thing. Like, Nick Nurse has proven that he can take a good enough roster to deep in the playoffs to winning the championship if you have a superstar player and veterans around. But Masai, you lose Kawhi and you kind of, take a small step back, but still pretty good. And then that third year in Nick Nurse's tenure is when he only hit his only losing season. It goes 27-45. But they didn't blow it up fully, right? They kept Pascal, they kept Fred VanVleet, and they didn't trade the pieces to do the Oklahoma City thing or the New Orleans Pelicans thing. So I kind of blame Masai for this. Like, I get Nick Nurse maybe not wanting to rebuild, but I think he would have been the perfect coach to rebuild. And so if you're Masai and you're kind of not convinced that Nick Nurse is that guy, like, I think that's your fault. I think you have to convince him to stay. You have to, go all in on the draft picks, because if you look at what Toronto has on its roster now, you have Fred VanVleet, who's probably not going to be there next year. Chris Boucher and Pascal Siakam, who are solid players, but I don't think they're going to be, guys who are going to be the best player on a championship team. You're really banking on Scotty Barnes developing his offensive game to a point where he can average, 25, 26 points a game, be that facilitator that he is already, and be that elite defender he is. And I love Scotty, and I think he's going to be that, a really special player for a very long time, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know if he gets there. And if you're banking on those guys to create a championship team, and you're not trading the OGs at the trade deadline who have been, rumored in pretty much every trade this past season, Chris Boucher, who I think is solid, Pascal Siakam, who is very good and, a pseudo all-star level player, to get those picks so that you can complement the Precious, the Scotty Barnes. Maybe you keep OG and you trade Fred, Pascal, and Chris. They didn't go all in, and so I kind of blame Masai for getting to this point, because he thought they were good enough to be competitive, and maybe that's what ownership wants. Maybe ownership wants them to not be a bottom of the rung team, and that's sort of where I'm at with it. It's like, no wonder Nick Nurse left, because you're going to be straddling the middle, pretty much for the next 3 to 4 years. And you might not be good enough to get to the point to win a championship. And Nick Nurse has proven that he's a championship coach. And so if Nick Nurse wants to leave, I get it. But I think it's Masai Ujiri's fault for letting it get to this point.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think you're right about the halfway rebuild, because and I get that losing season that you mentioned, and that's the one where they're in Tampa. So it's almost like that's such a weird year anyway. I can get chalking that one off. And after last year, it was betting big on the development, because Scotty came out of the gate hot, right? And Siakam, like you said, an all-star level player. Like, there's still plenty of talent on that roster. But I think this year was the one where you just kind of didn't make a decision. Like, it was always weird. Like, Jakob Poeltl is an undeniably talented player, but the Raptors, when they were hovering in playing position, trading assets for the future to go get Poeltl, who, again, a good player, but you still flamed out in the play-in game. Like, that's just a weird use of resources almost. And it is. It's kind of committal. It is kind of in that middle where you don't commit to either side fully. And you're right. I think a lot of guys are going to leave, but there are guys. If you don't want to trade Fred, that's fine. Fred's a little harder because he's been such a key part of your team. But like somebody like a Gary Trent Jr., who now is probably going to walk for free, who a lot of contenders I think would have taken a flyer on and maybe even given you a first for, given what he's shown in the past here. I don't know. You're right. It's definitely a non-committal, and now you kind of run the risk of being expensive and not as good. You're betting big. Like, they need Scotty Barnes to continue to take steps. If they're going to keep OG Anunoby, they need to continue. I mean, elite defender, but you're right. We need maybe a little more consistency on the offensive side of the ball. They're at a crossroads, and I don't know. The other comment too, it didn't help when Masai went out and said, well, good luck with these guys. I mean, I don't think he meant it to be a subliminal, but it sure as hell came off as a subliminal from Nick Nurse. And so, I don't know. I think they're going to have some tough decisions to make. I think some of them will naturally make themselves by guys going and getting those new contracts. But if you're in the same position next year as you were this year, I think you really got to make some harder decisions potentially, which include what does the future look like for a guy like Pascal Siakam, who would jumpstart any rebuild? Like, that's the thing, is you have guys that are undeniably talented. It's just that they can jumpstart the next wave of the Raptors a lot sooner.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, I love that I threw that out there to make it look like Nick Nurse was not happy and he wanted to go somewhere else. And it kind of loans this theory about the it being a mutual decision. I think that was more of a bad look for Masai than anything, because it just kind of goes into that, this conversation we're having, that it was a halfway rebuild and Masai built this team thinking that they could win. And Nick Nurse is like, no, this is not a winning team. Like, you probably needed to trade assets to get a better player, or you needed to really buy into the rebuild. And I think that's what I take away from it, because I mean, obviously I have a little bit of a bias thinking that these guys are doing it right. And so when I hear that, I hear more Nick saying, hey, you didn't commit to building this roster in the right way. This is your fault. These guys are not good enough to win a championship. They are pieces to trade to rebuild. So I think that's, like, I love that Masai thought that was a dig at Nick, but I don't think it was.
No, and you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, like, Nick Nurse didn't build that roster, Jerry built that roster. Like, that
Yeah.
it won't come off the right way. Now, the main rumor, or the early rumor, front runner at least all the way, is that Nick Nurse is already being wooed by Houston. Houston, of course, firing Steven Silas. They're in the market for a new coach. If you're looking for an instantly talented roster, Houston is not the place to go. But I would certainly think that Nick Nurse at least waits to see how these lottery balls play out before making a decision, because I think every coach on earth is going to want that job if Houston all of a sudden lands number one and has Victor Wembanyama coming in. So I can also see the appeal of that right now. Like, there are a lot of young guys there. You can kind of build the roster in your own way. I mean, Houston's got some of them in place already. The question is, how good are they? But I mean, you still have plenty of intriguing guys between Şengün, between Jalen Green, between Jabari Smith. That's it. I was
Kevin
like, who they
Porter.
draft this year? Jabari Smith. You're right, Kevin Porter too. So
They
I
have
get
another
the
guy,
appeal.
like a defensive sort of dude. I can't remember his name right now. It starts with a T, I think. But another promising young dude.
Yeah, and they have, I mean, again, they still are that superstar away from really taking this to the next level, but they're going to be in position to land somebody. I mean, even if it's not number one and you get Victor, like, you could put yourself in position for Scoot Henderson. You could put yourself in position to maybe land Brandon Miller from Alabama as well. They're going to have options. They're going to have a high pick. So I get the attractiveness of that job. I mean, I wonder how long it takes. I think anybody with the coaching vacancy is certainly going to give Nick Nurse a look. Again, has won a title recently, has won a coach of the year recently. That would be interesting, though, if he commits to the Houston job, I think, before the lottery plays out. Like, that's a big, I mean, it's big faith in them. And I get why, too. Like, don't get me wrong. I think, Houston's still got a lot of picks coming their way as well, post the Harden trade. They still have all those picks from Brooklyn. So that's, certainly an appealing job without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think a couple things I want to mention about the Houston thing. Silas got a raw deal. He was hired to coach Harden and Westbrook and a competitor. You know, they weren't probably going to win the title, but they were going to make the playoffs. You know, a couple years, and that got swept. The rug got pulled out from under him, and that. So it's a tough look for Silas. It wasn't his fault. But you hate to see that for a guy who a lot of people are very respectful of, and obviously his dad, right, Paul Silas, is legendary coach. So it's tough for him, and he was put in a tough spot. So, but as far as Nick Nurse goes on the coaching market, he's the best coach available, right? He might be he's definitely a top coach in the NBA right now. Maybe borderline top 5. Like if we go down that list, depends on how people view him. But he's a really good coach, and I think he's the best one available. And if Houston gets that number 1 pick, it's I don't see a reason why he wouldn't take that job. I think you're going to have to tighten up a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of stuff you got to tighten up. You got to build discipline with guys like Jalen Green and, especially Kevin Porter Jr., who, has never found a shot he didn't like.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I think Nick Nurse can do it, but it's going to be a developmental job, obviously. And he's proven that he can help develop guys to a certain extent. Tyre Eason is the other guy I was thinking about for Houston. He's really good off the bench for them, but I would like. I don't think anybody takes that job until the lottery plays out. I wouldn't if I was him. I don't know, man. I really want him in LA. I would love him for the Lakers.
Of course you do. What's wrong with Darvin Ham?
Nothing's wrong with Darvin Ham. Like Darvin Ham is a fine basketball coach.
This is obscene Lakers exceptionalism that you're trying to fire Darvin Ham as he's in the middle of a playoff series right now.
It's not about Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham's great. Love Darvin Ham. I want Nick Nurse so bad.
What Darvin Ham? You guys had the best record in the West after the All-Star break. It's not Darvin Ham's fault the roster didn't make sense for half a year.
I shouldn't disparage the good name of Darvin Ham.
You really should. This is a weird.
I've loved Nick Nurse for a long time. Like the stuff that he does, his defensive schemes are the most creative in the NBA since Tom Thibodeau was a part of that Boston Celtics run. Like I haven't seen a guy who's been able to do stuff defensively as creative as Nick Nurse since Tom Thibodeau was right before he got that Chicago gig. Like that's the kind of level of defensive mind that he is. And when you get players who are as versatile, especially if Anthony Davis is healthy, and he can be that guy who can switch on pick and rolls, and he can be the anchor on defensive end, how we saw it when they won the title. It's like my mind just starts running. I'm like, I love this. I love the way this is playing out. But it is mean to Darvin Ham, and I love Darvin Ham. He's doing a great job. But I don't know. I get really excited thinking, putting Nick Nurse with this current roster. Obviously, it might be different next year. If they're healthy, is the outcome very different? Probably not. But it feels more impactful thinking how he can manipulate our defense to be more effective.
Yeah, I think you guys are already fine now. But
we're great.
Whatever. Just
But where do you think he lands? Where would you want to put Nick Nurse if you looking at the landscape of the NBA? Where is a team that you're like, I would love to see Nick Nurse here?
It might be one.
Philly. You can't say Philly.
No, I wasn't going to say Philly. I mean, I do think the Philly job will be open depending how the second round goes. Like, and I would also say that they should absolutely interview him if the Sixers lose in the second round. Like, I don't think Doc is coming back. No, I don't know. I do like one of the younger teams that is appealing. It's just I don't think they're gonna get new coaches necessarily. That's the thing. Detroit's gonna stick with Dwayne Casey. I don't see there's not really going to be any changes in Charlotte happening. I mean, Houston's the open one, so that does kind of make sense. The other one that would have been intriguing maybe is Atlanta, but I just see if he could do something around Trey. Like if you could run those defensive schemes around Trey. But again, they just hired Quinn Snyder, who was also a really good coach. So I think that's well off the table at this point. I don't know.
I can give you a really good one.
What's that?
Cleveland.
Oh, wow. You're running Coach JB out already, huh?
I'm not a huge JB guy. I've never been a huge JB guy.
In a weird way, I get it.
Imagine him with Mobley.
Oh, God,
you really solve the interior. Good. Like, there's no interior defensive problems whatsoever. And obviously, Garland and Mitchell has surprised how good of a defender he's been this year compared to last year.
Yeah.
It's just if this Cleveland team doesn't make it out of the first round, which is possible, they lose to New York last night, and I think they're it's 2-1 now or 3-1.
Yeah, it's 2-1. 2-1 Knicks.
If they don't make it out of this round with what I think is way more talent than this Knicks team, that's very good, but I think they're overachieving a little bit to beat this Cleveland team. I'd go after Nurse, and I think that's the most appealing job for a guy like Nurse, where you have young talent, but you have superstar level young talent. Like these
Oh
guys,
yeah.
Evan Mobley can be developed. People like Simmons. I'm a big Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo guy. They had their pod the other day, and they said that they were both on Mobley to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. And I think Simmons compared him to KG, which I don't know if he's got that same sort of FU in him that KG had, but talent wise he's up there. I think that makes a ton of sense for a guy like Nick Nurse. If you really want, to win for a long time, like that's probably the best job. But obviously, Bickerstaff is in that position, so Cleveland would have to, make a move there. But
yeah, and it could happen. And you're not wrong. It could happen after that first round. Like that would be. I think there are a lot of people. I mean, I picked Cleveland in that series. I think most of the general public did. The Knicks are close. So I'm not saying it would be some colossal upset. Like it is a 4-5 matchup. But I mean, if they flame out, we'll get to this a little later when we go Eastern Conference. But they scored 79 points in a playoff game last night. That is alarming, to say the least. No, it's not alarming. This episode of the Driving Dish NBA podcast. Welcome, everybody. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Justin Cousart, my co-host, is off this week, spending some much-deserved family time. So, in his place, we got Mr. Sam B. Albuquerque, reporter for the Spartanburg Herald-Journal, noted Lakers fan, but he covers all sorts of sports in upstate South Carolina, so definitely check that out. I mean, you're fully back. We got spring sports season going on right now. How's it going up? What's on tap this week, I should say, in upstate South Carolina sports?
We're thick in high school lacrosse right now. Lacrosse is the first spring sport that starts, first one to get in the playoffs. So we're into the what we call the upper state finals now. Start early next week, Monday, Tuesday for girls and boys. Burns High School girls, they're phenomenal. Like the way they're looking.
Okay. All right. There you go. So there's a little early prediction. Definitely, get out ahead of that if you're. Dude, I mean, I hope that there's no gambling on high school sports. Jesus, that would be all sorts of being a degenerate.
Let me tell you a story that is not confirmed whatsoever, and it's a very hearsay kind of thing. The guy I replaced at the paper got moved to the Greenville News within the same company, and so he helped me a lot, and we worked together, really well. He told me that people DM'd him on Twitter high school football betting lines, and I just, he obviously, as one of the most big J journalists that I know, was like, that's unethical, leave me alone. But Fridays in the South, man. Fridays in the South are a thing.
Yeah, it's not quite Texas, but I mean, there's no doubt about it. Obviously there's been, I mean, even from the basketball front, there's been a pretty fair amount of talent that's come out of there. I mean, most notably recently, Zion Williamson. I think that jumps off the name is one of the biggest. But
Spartanburg Day School is literally a stone's throw away from my apartment. Literally, I could walk there and not break a sweat.
Yeah, and that's good. Hey, I mean, because listen, it's about to be real humid down there. Not exactly envious of that. That's one of the better things about being back in the North. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. I'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Stitcher, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Of course, you can watch the video version as well. We are on YouTube. Just search Driving Dish NBA podcast, and you can see Sam and I. Sam's got his Arsenal jersey on, the retro one. So we maybe have to sneak a little prem talk in and test his nerves about how he's feeling about the end of the season. Spoiler alert, it's probably not too great from all our conversations off the mic. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so I want to come back here, and we're going to start in the Western Conference. So for everybody following along, we're just kind of going to run through these series. We're going to do them in seeding order. So, Phoenix and Clippers, for example, will be the fourth one in the West. But I do want to start there. I feel like we've been starting a lot in the West recently. But at the end of the day, it's just way more intriguing to me right now. Like, there's a lot more that feels up in the air. It's probably the first time in a while that there just isn't a clear favorite at this point. It feels like we've had teams that have had moments of it, but then, injuries happen. Just certain things don't go certain ways. But let's just get right into it. We got a whole lot to talk about. So we'll start at 1-8, and that's Denver, Minnesota. Denver winning last night to take the 3-0 lead, winning the first game in Minnesota. A great game from Anthony Edwards, but again, a 120-111 win. Denver held home court, looked extremely good there. And I guess really, I mean, that's my Denver should be winning this series, I guess. So in a way, it's like, cool, Denver's handling their business. They're the number one seed. Like they are significantly better than Minnesota. But for a team that the main narrative in the playoffs going around was, hey, they kind of stumbled down the stretch. You kind of want to see them come out and make a statement. I feel like they made a statement a little bit. Like just this, these are professional wins, I guess is my point. Like they're not playing with their food. They're getting the contributions from the bench, like Jamal Murray. I mean, he's not coming off the bench, obviously, but the talk was about that second guy who can be behind Jokic. I think Murray's looked pretty well or pretty good to start this playoffs off so far. Michael Porter Jr. shot well in game 3. So it just, they're getting the contributions we need to. Like Christian Braun had a great game. The other one, or Christian Bruin, I should say. So, I mean, like I said, they're getting those depth contributions.
Yeah, I think this is where, when we talk about the West being so wide open is where I really am kind of on the other side of that narrative. I think this Denver team has done enough and to be considered the favorite and by, a pretty clear margin. I think the only team that's right there that should be like, hey, Denver is the favorite. This team could be the favorite is Phoenix if they can show, that they're able to match the playoffs. And there's obviously a good reason why we have questions about Phoenix right now, given that, that roster hasn't been able to spend any time together. But the question marks going back, whenever we look at this Denver team and how they've fallen short in previous years, has always been health. And they're healthy right now. Jamal Murray is 27 points a game this series. Jokic is a rock. He's probably the only one that's healthy. But Michael Porter Jr. looks phenomenal. If he's playing the way that we know he's capable of with his talent, I don't see a reason that this team shouldn't be considered a favorite. Like I get it, they a bit of a dip towards the end, but they're the number 1 seed. They have a multiple time MVP. They have 2 really good wingmen and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Aaron Gordon is playing phenomenally this season. He's averaging like 16 points a game. We know he can be a great defender. He's a phenomenal athlete, and you can stick him on your best on the other team's best wing player. KCP's been shooting really well. I think he's averaging like 12 a game. Bruce Brown, quality off the bench, Jeff Green, like in the playoffs, that sort of that lineup, that rotation starts to 8 guys, 7 guys, at some points, and to me, they have probably guys in the entire league. Even going to the West, like I think I going to the East, I think their 7 is best. Obviously, the top of some teams may be better. When you think of Milwaukee and even Boston. But I don't understand why they're not the clear-cut favorite. Is it just because of that dip towards the end of the season? Because to me, they have everything you need. They have shooting. They have a go-to defender. Their defense isn't phenomenal overall as a team, but it's pretty solid. Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray are those secondary scorers, and we know Nikola Jokic can, when he wants to get a bucket, he can get a bucket.
Yeah, I think it's not as much for me as the dip at the end of the season. And I'm with you. I mean, I've been beating the Denver drum. If anything, I'm glad you're on it. And I feel like a little bit kind of a fraud recently, where maybe my belief in them has waned and faded a little bit. But no, I think it's because they've been here, but they haven't been healthy. And I guess they don't have the history that some of the other ones have that you're maybe higher on. Like, we've obviously seen the Warriors do this multiple times, even with the Lakers. Like LeBron and AD haven't in a while, but they've been there consistently. We've seen the Grizzlies make a conference finals run before. Like, there isn't that. We haven't seen that Denver team fully healthy. But you're right, to your point. Like, Denver's been the number 1 seed in the West the whole season in a conference that's been inconsistency and has been marred by these drastic swings where, 3 and 11 were basically 2 or 3 games apart for large portions of the season. Like, Denver has been that team consistently in the number 1 spot. But I think it's the lack of history. I really think from a general perspective, that's why. I also think, unfortunately, the toxicity of the MVP debate has probably played in a little bit. Like, I think there's been a lot of anti-Jokic campaigning, not just from Philly, but in general, like even in Milwaukee, a little bit with Giannis towards the end. And so I think there were a lot of people who at that point looked for the reasons to bash Denver as well. But no, I mean, their starting lineup, I mean, I love that Caldwell Pope pickup. Like, that was one of the ones I was really high on. Like, obviously a guy who's won a championship before, we know he can play in big minutes and step up. They've got the weapons. Like, for me with Denver, if it's not going to happen for them this year, then you wonder about when it's going to happen, because I think this team is built to win. I am really encouraged. And to me, it's outbought their dip at the end of the season by the fact that they've just been able, like, these have been professional NBA wins. Like, they're going to have a tough series no matter what. Given Phoenix, a team who I talked great about last week and who I still believe in, even though they've, given me a couple of moments early on where I was like, maybe I should have been as high on Phoenix. But even with the Clippers, like the Clippers, we'll get into a little bit, but like, I don't know, when Kawhi's healthy, they've looked like the best team in the NBA. Like, forget the Western Conference. Like, they've looked like the favorites in general. But Kawhi also now hasn't played in Game 3 and may not play Game 4. So, look, you're not wrong. If they're second and third guys, I mean, Porter was their leading scorer in Game 3, but if they're able to consistently give them like 25 a game, they're going to have a chance to win this whole thing for sure.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of that series, though, is this Minnesota team obviously has been disappointing, but it's not a not talented team. You look up and down that roster, and there's a lot of pieces that, if they were having a fire sale, that would return a pretty, but at the same time, you're saying like they are the 8 seed and they haven't been cohesive as a team. So it makes me be a little bit measured about this performance. I'm looking at how the entire team has played throughout the season, but this performance has been, very convincing that they're the 1 seed and they should be the favorite, at least to me, because Cat is a good player. Anthony Edwards is a very exciting player, even though I don't think he's had a great, playoff run so far. But
until last night, I don't know. Last night he was hooping. Last night,
yeah, but like disappointing earlier in the series. But it is his first playoff, so there's that. Rudy's been playing okay actually, but it's just that trade package that came back from him just makes the expectations unreasonable. So when you see the way Denver's playing against a team that's they control the game, they controlled every single game that they've been in, and I think they're, like you said, putting in professional performances, and I think we should be talking them not as the favorite to win the title, but the favorite to beat every team in their path in the West. And maybe it's not a huge favorite against Phoenix, but it should be a huge favorite against Minnesota. But they should be slightly favored over Phoenix, I'd say.
yeah, I would say I mean, if they go out and they sweep, I think, Phoenix has looked good and they've handled their business. But I mean, again, I think you look at them and you go, what does this series look like with injuries? We'll get there in a little bit. Let's go to 2-7 though, and flip over to your boys, the Lakers, and of course the Grizzlies as well. The big story of the series, Ja Morant's hand got hurt in Game 1, landed really hard, did not play Game 2, though that obviously did not dissuade Memphis. Memphis coming out and getting a big win on their home floor, which leads us to tonight. One of the few series that has not gone Game 3. So we're sitting at 1-1 right now, going back to LA. The story of Game 1, the Lakers' depth. Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, their leading scorers, just like everybody drew up. But again, I think that's a really, really impressive win for Memphis to bounce back in Game 2. Give Desmond Bane, give Jaren Jackson a lot of credit. Those guys got it done. Obviously, without Ja, I still think the Lakers are the favorite in this series. I think I had Memphis winning in 7 at the beginning of the series. I thought this was going to be tough no matter what. If they're missing Ja for a large portion, I do think it's going to be an uphill climb for them. The Lakers are weird to me, and I want to get your take on this as a Lakers fan, because their variance is just all over the place. Like, after Game 1, I go, wow, this Lakers team really could win a title. Like, there are windows where you could talk me into them running the gauntlet and going all the way, and then they go out and just have such a stinker in Game 2 when it's like, hey, you really could kind of just like go into Memphis, come back home, be up 2-0, and really just put the nail in the coffin. And you let them take it to you on their home floor. And I know that they're desperate and they had to win that game, but the way we just talked about Denver's professional wins, it's kind of like, Lakers, don't mess around with this a little bit either here. Memphis is really good.
Yeah, Memphis is good, and without Ja, it's crazy to think that they're, you can make an argument. I don't think this is true, but you can make the argument that without Ja, they're better. Because it's been like, I think, a 50-game sample size with the majority of this group without him, and it's been relatively close. Like, you can make the argument just as good, if not a little bit better than they are without Ja, because of the what they do on the defensive end. Because it's sort of, you don't really know how they're going to play on the offensive end. Jaren Jackson is great, but does he scare many people when he has the ball in his hands? I don't think as much as a guy like Ja. So it's a strange way because you go into the series thinking Ja's gonna play and you're gonna have to defend in a certain way, and especially with our roster, if you can funnel Ja against Anthony Davis at the rim for multiple attempts, like that's probably the best way to defend them, right? They go pick and roll, don't switch, fight over the screen, have whoever is Anthony Davis hopefully in the center step up, and then you rotate around that. And like I said, I think Anthony Davis wins more than 50% of those battles at the rim. But when Josh steps out and you're planning on playing defense in a certain way, now you have to kind of figure out, and you have Desmond Bane in the corner shooting. You got Roddy who shot I like 12 threes when they played in game 2. I was like, who is this guy? Like, I don't know who this guy is. And so it's interesting how they play. But I think when we go home right now, especially after Dillon Brooks started talking, LeBron isn't about those games. Like, I'm not going to say LeBron's the same killer as MJ or as Kobe, but when you provoke him so flagrantly, he's going to respond. And I think he's going to have a big game 3 at home. I think still having great games from Dennis Schroeder or from Jarrett Vanderbilt or Malik Beasley, who have been pretty good for this team in the regular season. I think we win 2 at home, and it's just a matter of are we going to get game 5 or game 6? Because I don't think this Memphis team is good enough without Ja.
No, I agree with that. I think you guys are the clear favorite if Memphis doesn't have Ja. My question, or no one really needs to step up for me, who I need to see it out of, D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell, his whole playoff career has been kind of suspect, but these early Lakers games too. I mean, going back to the play, and like, he hasn't had a single game yet. And I mean, last time he was 2 of 11 from the field last game. And these are good looks. Like, that's the thing, is he's getting looks within the flow of the offense. Like, he's somebody that I would really like to see step up here, because I think if he's going, like, that's what raises the Lakers ceiling a little bit. Because you're right, everybody else in terms of, Anthony Davis has been excellent defensively. You mentioned Dennis Schroeder. He's been great, obviously, as well. I mean, going back to the huge shot too against Minnesota in the play-in game, like, it's just one of these situations where they're paying him a lot of money he's not going to be that third star per se, but he needs to be one of your better starters, and he just hasn't been that so far. For Memphis, I think the biggest encouraging thing in game 2 for them is I love the performance of Xavier Tillman. Like, they needed somebody to step up big time, and them getting 22 points from him. Their biggest issue too has been just the front court. Like, it's already a little bit, weaker with Steven Adams not playing at all in these playoffs. So, I definitely, they needed somebody to get there. He did on their home floor. I'm kind of with you though. Like, if the Lakers are going to be serious about winning the Western Conference, I would like to see them win these 2 games at home. Like, I think it's one of these things where it's like, put them away. You're going to have what seems to be a tough go of it no matter what in the next round. If Sacramento is able to pull this series off and knock the Warriors out, like, I'm going to be hard pressed to pick them losing against anybody at that point. And then obviously the Warriors, defending champions, I don't think we need to go down that hole again. But yeah, I mean, Ja's injury though, it really looms large over this series, like more than some of the others. I mean, Embiid's knee is going to loom, but that's more of like a next round thing. Obviously, Giannis's back looms. You maybe feel a little bit better about that series with how Milwaukee responded. Again, we'll get to the East in a little bit. But yeah, I just, in what I think could have been a really good series, it is a little dampened with Ja's hand, and maybe we get him going in the 5th or 6th game by that point. But if you're up 3-1, it's right. Memphis will still have home court, but it's hard pressed for that to matter. I know 3-1 comebacks happen, but that may feel like a little bit of a reach there. But to me, it's just more disappointing. I was really looking to see these guys go at full steam. I do want to see if LeBron can pull it out, though. You're right about his Dillon Brooks point, because Dillon Brooks has just been asking for it the whole time. And I mean, look, we know what he does. He's a professional pest at this point. He's, really trying to get in that like Draymond, Pat Bev bag. But yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to poke LeBron every game. Like, at some point, I know LeBron's 38 now, but at some point, like, I watched this dude against Boston in 2012. Like, we know what it can look like if it gets to that point. I'm interested to see if LeBron has that in him too. Like, I am. Like, I mean, obviously I still think he's one of the best players in the league, but like, again, 38 years old, there is a limit to it a little bit. I really want to see what he brings tonight, and we'll be finding out later. In that 3-6 matchup, Sacramento Golden State 2-1 right now. Sacramento winning both their games at home. Golden State coming back in a huge must-needed win in Game 3. And it's funny because, I think when you look at this from an outside, you immediately just, if you look at the numbers, go, hey, Sacramento, they're up 2-1. Like, this is everything we wanted. But not to sound like a Warriors guy, but I think Kevin Huerter really hammered home the urgency where it's like, which again, this feels weird to say because the Warriors haven't been good on the road all year, especially their depth guys. Like Jordan Poole's Warriors or splits on the road, I should say, are horrendous. But really, I mean, it's been across the board with a lot of their guys haven't just performed consistently on the road this year. I'm interested to see with Sacramento, though. They've got 2 of those 3 games at home, but Kevin Huerter in pregame today said, hey, we want to treat this like a desperation game. Kind of give ourselves the opportunity here to go up 3-1. It's a lot different going back to a raucous Sacramento up 3-1 than tied at 2-2 when, maybe the pressure of playing the defending champs gets to you a little bit. At the same point, though, Sacramento, look, they're getting in their offense. Like, they also just missed every shot, it felt like, in Game 3. Like, they're getting out, they're playing fast. We know that's something they want to do. I don't know. Like, if this wasn't Golden State, I feel like I would be giving Sacramento a lot more like, hey, you got them on the ropes a little bit. But, I mean, Golden State had to win Game 3. There's no doubt about it. And I think they have to win Game 4 as well. But it's like, you got to feel good about their chances to win Game 4. They've got a real shot.
Yeah, I think I'm still picking the Warriors here. Like, from what I've seen, especially at the end of Game 2, when before Draymond got kicked out of the game, it really felt like they started to figure out a lineup that was giving the Kings some trouble, especially with Draymond at the small ball 5, which we've seen, for ever since we go back to the prime Warriors. And especially now that it's 2-1 and they've lost it on the road, and we know Golden State's not great, like you mentioned, but they have been home. They'll get another win, I think, here. When that happens, Sacramento starts to get in their head. This is a young with no championship experience other than Harrison Barnes, who was on this Warriors team, who he knows is very good. So he's probably not getting a lot of confidence from the fact that he knows what Steph can do and what Draymond can do and what Clay can do when they're hot. So when I rack my brain about going through this roster, like De'Aaron Fox, how many playoffs games has he played in his career? This is his first 3, right? Played, done a little bit in the playoffs with Charlotte. DeMontis has not been, in a lot of playoffs. And there's Kevin Huerter when it was on that Western Conference team, or Eastern Conference championship team with Atlanta, but still not. He's not. I don't lean on Kevin Huerter for leadership. So I think there's a legitimate shot here that Golden State gets Game 4. It's 2-2. You're heading back to Sacramento, and Sacramento's like, oh, I don't know. Did we just get this team who's bad on the road and we beat them? And maybe we're not the 3 seed, really. Maybe we're just, a first time playoff team. And you start to get in your head, especially with these guys who don't have that experience, who don't have that leadership. And there's no legit player on this team who was a leader on a championship winning team or a team that's been like De'Aaron Fox, DeMontis Sabonis are not those dudes. And they might be those dudes moving forward in their career, and they've had a phenomenal season. This may be the start. But when you go to Game 5 at home, you remember what they did Game 2 before Draymond gets suspended. You lose 2 in a row away, and Steph and Clay and Draymond start clicking, and they figure out that line really slow down here and Fox really stood the rest of the team. I think Sacramento starts to lose it, and I don't. This series could go 6. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes 6 for the Warriors.
So I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I will play devil's advocate a little bit here because that Game 1 win by the Kings was as impressive of a win as I've seen for them. And that kind of dissuaded a lot of my fear of, hey, the Kings aren't ready for this moment. The Warriors were playing killer ball. They were up 19. They blitzed them with their typical third quarter run, and Steph and Clay and all these guys were hitting big shot after big shot. And every time it looked like the Warriors threw a haymaker, the Kings came back and hit them right back. Like De'Aaron Fox and Malik Malik Monk are just straight up not scared of the moment. And they basically had Sabonis and Alcatraz the first game. Like I think he had 11 points or something like that. Like he was a complete non-factor, and the Kings still found a way to gut out that win. Now I'm with you. Like I think game 4, again, going back to Herter's comments, like there should definitely be some urgency, because if the Kings go up 3-1, they can do this. And at that point, it's like, yo, we're here. Again, we can take anybody out, but you're right. You don't want to give the Warriors any ounce of life. Like you knew you were going to get a shot from them in game 3. And I think you can walk out of that game if you're Sacramento going, hey, we didn't even play that bad. We just shot poorly. Like we just shot poorly. We can, Keegan Murray got into foul trouble super early. I think he picked up 3 in the first 6 minutes. Like it just happens sometimes. But how game 4 goes, I think, is going to be telling. Like, if the Warriors eke one out, I don't think it's the end of the world. But you're right. If the Warriors just come out and blitz them and just, smoke them the way they kind of did in game 3, then I think you go back to Sacramento and you're not scared, because I don't think this team is ever going to be scared. And you do. You have one of the true home court advantages in the NBA in Sacramento. But, like, those nerves start to get there for a little bit for, like you said, a team that just doesn't have as much experience where the Warriors do. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm rooting for 7 because I think this has been a super entertaining series, like across the board. I think it's just like, it's full of offense. It's a lot of fun to watch.
So what you said is the thing for me is I think the Kings know inside their head, and I think they've already given them that light. You had to kill them in game 3. I don't think you did. And obviously you shoot poorly. You mentioned Keegan Murray gets in foul trouble. But I think they know, because Draymond wasn't there, and because how the Warriors, in my opinion, from what I saw, started to figure out how to play them defensively with Draymond at the 5. I think the Kings know. I think they know that. They think back to game 2 and how it wasn't necessarily, obviously they win by more of a margin than they did in game 1, but they saw that it started to turn. I think they saw that in their heads. And with Draymond coming back in game 4, I think that mentally they might already be at the point where they're scared. And obviously you never want to talk about, what people are thinking, because we don't know these people. But I'm playing into the inexperience, the lack of leaders that matter. Obviously Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter may say the right things, but at the end of the day, if your best players aren't your leaders, aren't the ones with the playoff experience, then you don't really know until you get past, this point. And so I really think I would love to see it go 6 or go 7. I mean, to have Kings have that game 7 at home against the defending champs. And if they get over that hump, you can really kind of start to buy into De'Aaron Fox and Domas as those guys that can team, in the playoffs. But I think as of now, at the moment, I think they might be a little scared, and I think the Golden State Warriors are just clicking, and I think they win in 6. I think they end up winning 4 straight.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And you're right. I mean, if they put it this way, if they get game 4 and they get game 5, it's over in 6. You're right. I don't think there's any chance if they get 4 and 5. At that point, the momentum will have just shifted. And so going to the last series in the West, the 4-5 matchup, Phoenix and the Clippers. Phoenix is up 2-1. Obviously, the big story has been Kawhi Leonard. He just, looked excellent the first 2 games and then is just not playing game 3. Tweaked the knee, apparently. He's already been ruled out for game 4. So Phoenix has really got an opportunity here on the road in LA to go up 3-1 and really kind of put the clamps on this series, which is remarkable, because I think even with the third game, with how well Norm Powell played and how well the Clippers hung without Paul George and without Kawhi Leonard, like, the story to me early on was that the Clippers are playing great. Like, the Clippers looked like, without Paul George, that title team that we finally thought they could be when they were assembled. Kawhi looked healthy, just playing super efficient ball. Their bench was everywhere. Like, even Russell Westbrook, I know he was 3-19 the first game, but the way he's been crashing the boards and just really hounding Kevin Durant on defense, kind of making his life miserable. That really, like, the Clippers in all this chaos looked like a team who might be starting to separate themselves in the West a little bit. And then this just unfortunately happens. And all of a sudden we go right back to square one. Obviously a massive break for Phoenix, and they responded, to their credit. Like, Booker getting 40 plus in a game 2 that they had to win, and that they were down at halftime. Like, you really start to, I think, ask some questions if they go down 2-0. Handle their business in game 3. I know, again, got blitzed by the Clippers, and maybe it was a little tighter than you thought, but they were able to get it done, have a big chance tonight. I mean, with Phoenix, we know they're top heavy, and I guess the concerns going into the other round is it's just Chris Paul and Ayton. Like Kevin Durant and Booker haven't really been an issue. Like they've been getting their numbers. But you're going to need those two to play consistently. They traded all their depth to go get KD. And again, when they're clicking, I think they can beat anybody. And I think now with given the injuries, like they'll survive here and look, survive in advance. We talked about it last episode. That's all you got to do. Sometimes the playoff is a war of attrition, but for a team that I thought really, given the way how they looked when KD was at the end of the season, I know there's an adjustment, but they certainly looked like they could just not only win the West, but go out and win this whole thing, early still. But I would have liked to see a little more from Phoenix out of this Clippers series so far.
I would have loved to see Phoenix beat this full strength Clippers team. Like I want to see Kawhi out there playing the way he played in the first couple games here, because if they were able to do that with their lack of depth, I think they're their sixth guy is like Josh Okogie, who I thought was going to be okay, but ended up not being that great. So it's like if they were able to just with KD, Devin Booker, Aiden, and Chris Paul really kind of going out there and carrying this team for, you can't really expect Chris Paul at this point to play 48 minutes, but, have a high impact for a very long time and play most of those games and really carry this team, through what looks like a really good Clipper roster. It would have been, then the conversation would have shifted from the Denver being the favorites to Phoenix being the favorites, in my opinion. But because they're going to go through a Clippers team without Kawhi, and I think they'll get through relatively easily. Maybe it stretches a little bit because they're still trying to figure out the kinks. It's disappointing for the landscape of the entire playoffs, because I think Phoenix is probably the only team in the NBA that has the superstar talent, the top level talent, to be able to beat whoever comes out of the East. And so that's my thing. That's my thing with this Phoenix run, and we're not really going to find out much through this series about when Phoenix gets through about what kind of team it is, and we're only going to really find that out against Denver, I think. So that's my biggest takeaway from this. Like Kawhi's been phenomenal, but this is who he's been is pretty much his entire career. He's been a guy who's been deteriorating for a while now physically, and when he has the ability to be special, but it's just disappointing, especially with Paul George too not being there.
It really is, because I mean Kawhi is the one guy where for me, since LeBron's kind of lost that mantle, when you look at the best players in the league, right now it's Giannis and Steph for me. And then you've always got KD kind of hanging around there a little bit too. But when Kawhi gets going, like he really is the one player that I think can jump into that category. Like he looks like the guy when he's healthy. And even again, only 2 playoff games, but that's where it's so like, it just always looks so good for a second. And you're right. Like he hasn't, that's the other reality though, sadly, since that 2019 with the Raptors, he just hasn't put it together consistently. And, again, there's still a chance he plays this series. Like this could, but by that point, even if he comes back for game 5, like you're running a real risk of being down 3-1. And unfortunately, it's just a double whammy. If you had Paul George, you go, maybe they can survive. You just got to win one game and you'll be all right. But, the double whammy of not having PG, like that just probably maybe too much to survive here for the Clippers. So, kind of unfortunate. All right, we're going to skip who's balling, who's fallen, just because we have a lot going on in a whole other conference still to talk about. So let's go right east then, and we'll start with Milwaukee and Miami. 1-1 as of now. Game 3 is later tonight. Of course, the big story from game 1, Giannis's back injury, knocked out pretty early. Did not play the rest of the game. Miami did end up winning, though, of course, not without, a war of attrition with their own, with Tyler Hero breaking his hand. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. So unless Miami gets by this series and really starts making a run, you're probably not going to see him the rest of the playoffs. Miami had to win that game 1. They did credit. But, give Milwaukee a lot of credit too. Like you don't want to go down 2-0 and potentially run the risk of running Giannis back. Like the question is, can all your other guys step up? Can it be Bobby Portis, Brooke Lopez, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, getting you over the finish line against a team like Miami? And they did. They really went out and just controlled that game too. So I think that's going to feel good if you're a Milwaukee fan. You've had a few days off. I think they're good enough to get by Miami without Giannis. I think it'll be a lot closer than it probably should be if they don't have Giannis going. But, I think they showed in game 2 that they have that a little bit still. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of been the theme here, right? Is like we're just watching these injuries right now. And Hero would be a lot bigger deal, I think, obviously, if Miami, we had faith in them to go further. But with a number to watch, that certainly looms large in any series against Boston. Like if Giannis isn't 100%, they're just not going to get by.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think he's listed questionable for game 3 is what I saw. My thing is it's sort of like a backup quarterback with, like, when I look at this Milwaukee Bucks roster, is you want them to tread water. You want them to not lose the game for you, but put the team in a position to win the game. If they can keep it even by the time Giannis gets back, let's say he gets back game 5 or game 6. If it's 3-2 or 2-2 by the time Giannis gets back, we're good. I think this roster is good enough. I think this roster is a little better as a team than Miami has been this year. I think obviously Miami is more talented when you look at guys like Jimmy Butler and all those dudes. But Drew Holiday is phenomenal on both sides of the ball. Chris Middleton is one of the better wing scorers in the league. I think they have the ability to be up 3-2 by the time game 6 comes around. And I think if they are at that point, or even if they win the series without Giannis, and they want to hold Giannis until the second round, I think it just bodes to the fact that this is the best team in the league. And that's where I'm at with them, is that I think they're good enough without Giannis to win this series, but I know they're good enough to keep it at 500, to keep it floating. And if Giannis gets back in time, it's not going to be an issue.
Oh, and this is where seeding is so important, right? Because talk about them clutching up that number 1 seed and really holding off Boston. Boston is likely going to have a second round matchup against Philly. Boston's going to be the favorite, but that's going to be a lot tougher of a series realistically than. And I mean, no disrespect to the Knicks or the Cavs, they're playing great, but I think both of those teams are significantly worse at this point than Milwaukee is. Like they're definitely a step below. They're just, again, that'll just be less of a bloodbath. Like I think because they're going to want it. You're going to need to be fresh if you play Boston. Like I think that's the Eastern Conference Finals most people are anticipating at this point. Like you're going to need everything you got against that team. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you hope the best case scenario, if Milwaukee can go in and win tonight and 1-1 in Miami, you're already at that point going back with home court in game 5, no matter what. I think that'll be super huge. And, again, encouraging off that game 2. If they had got smoked again in game 2, then I would start to wonder about their just championship ceiling in general. Because it's like, look, I know Giannis is Giannis, but you got to survive a little bit when he's off the floor, which they have in large portions of the season too. So, I think they'll be fine again long term. And I think Giannis, the fact that he's already questionable for game 3, like I don't think this is a scenario where we're running him not playing the rest of the series.
Yeah.
To that point as well, they should probably try to wrap this up as soon as possible. You don't want to run the risk of this going longer. Your guys just being a little more hurt. And then going to 2 is going to Boston now with Atlanta.
I want to make one more point on the Milwaukee-Miami matchup.
Okay.
The thing with about this series that worries me that I think I should have mentioned early on is the fact that Erik Spoelstra is still one of the best coaches in the NBA, and I think he's a better coach than Bud. And we've seen with Spoelstra, as the playoffs go on, as a series goes on, he starts to figure stuff out. And I worry if Giannis doesn't get back by game 5, and if Miami takes a 3-1 lead or something like that, Spoelstra has gotten to a point where he knows how to attack this roster and win these games. And if you're up 3-1 and you only need one more game to wrap the series up, and you got what at that point you would have three more shots at it. I'm scared that Miami could get through that. I'm scared that Miami will like Spoelstra will get to the point where they could figure it out.
Yeah, you can't get to that. You can't let that happen if you're Milwaukee. Like, it just can never be a point where they only need to win one more game. And again, unfortunate because it's injury related, but I do think that's the one part where Hero going down helps a ton for them too. Like, this was already a team that was offensively challenged, and now you're losing one of your better scorers. Like, I just don't think, Jimmy is going to be Jimmy, but I just don't think they have enough otherwise. Going to 2-7 though, a little bit. I got to be honest. I didn't think Atlanta had that win in them last night in game 3. I really thought this was going sweep territory, given how because Atlanta played well in the first half of game 2, and it just didn't really matter. Boston just controlled it the rest of the way. But give Atlanta a lot of credit. They finally got Trae Young and DeJounte Murray going at the same time, especially late game. Every time Boston made it close, DeJounte hit that quarter 3 with Derek White draped all over him. Trae Young hit a corner 3 with Al Horford just draped all over him. They really did a good job every time it looked like Boston was about to just suck their soul out, and go on one of those fourth quarter runs. They didn't. I think Boston defensively was a mess. I also think they let Atlanta really dictate the pace offensively, which is surprising. And so in a way, I think that's a little disappointing if you're Boston. I'm not remotely worried about this series. Like, I still think this is wrapped up in 5. Boston is without a doubt the better team. They're just getting, the contributions that they've in particular been getting from Brogdon, now 6th man of the year, Malcolm Brogdon, and Derek White as well. They've been basically 20-point scorers this series. Like, good luck if they're giving you that. There's just, with the clean up for Tatum and Brown and what they're already just consistently giving you every night, like, you're going to have a hard time matching that.
Yeah, what's crazy to me about this game, specifically game 3, is that Boston shot the ball really well. I think they were like 43% from 3-point, which was, ridiculous. And, they missed a couple free throws, but it was like, I'm looking at the box score right now. It's 11 of 16. So 5 points wasn't going to make a difference in this one. And you don't expect people to go, perfect from the free throw line. My thing is that even though, and especially lately, it feels like this Atlanta roster and Trae Young specifically has been getting a lot of negative talk, a lot of people trying to find places to put Trae Young in trade. And I'm not saying that that's not a legitimate argument. My point is that this roster, for the most part, was the roster that was there that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, this team may be a 7 seed, they may be struggling, they may be a new coach, but a lot of these guys won a couple playoff series, and so I'm not going to sit here and even come close to saying that they have a chance against Boston, because they don't. They're going to lose the series relatively quickly. I'd be surprised if it goes past 6. But you can't expect a team that's won multiple playoff series to not at least get one at home. And that's what I think this game was, because it wasn't that Boston didn't shoot the ball well. It really feels like they had, Atlanta had a little pride here. And, Trae Young dropped 32 and Jonathan Murray got 25. And that just, and a pretty decent contribution for the bench. Bogdanovich, Johnson, Sadiq Bey, all in double digits. And they only played 9 guys who, are probably the guys that are going to play, for a majority of the series. I think, I don't know. I think it's just a professional pride thing, and you can't expect the team that's won multiple playoff series that has all-star level players to not at least get one game.
Yeah, Sadiq Bey was a really good pickup for them. Like, I just love the energy he plays with. Like, him and Okongwu are constantly just creating havoc everywhere on the offensive boards. Even when they're not grabbing them, they're just making, like, they're battling, they're wearing guys out. And you're right. I do think there's a lot of pride. I think that win for Atlanta was really good to see long term. Like, there's been a lot of like swirling around this team long term, and can they play together? The trade rumors have started. People off the conference finals run, like, they were a 500 team this year. Again, I'm not suggesting the series is flipped. Like, Boston is still going to win the series, I think, pretty handedly. But I think when you look at bringing Coach Quinn Snyder in, a great hire for them. I think you look at what Trae and DeJounte can be offensively. Again, last night being an example of what I think Atlanta fans hope that looked like when they brought them in. I think you got to feel a lot better about it. And that's something that you're right. That pride goes a long way when you're building towards next year, when they can go out and kind of make some decisions around this roster. Like, I don't know. It would be wild if they made the series interesting. Again, Boston in 5. I'm not jumping off the cliff here.
Yeah,
but
I think Boston in 5 is fair. Boston in 6, I think, is the safe bet. What do you I kind of want to talk a little bit about this Atlanta roster. Where are you at on these, this sort of roster construction? And are you at the point where I've heard lots of people say that Trae Young needs to be on the trade market and they need to be looking in a different direction? Where are you on that? Because I'm not at the point where you have to trade Trae Young now. I think you can think about it, and it's if this thing doesn't happen next year, then we start talking about trading Trae Young sort of position. I think you need to give Quinn Snyder at least one offseason and one full run, because he comes in the middle of the year after McMillan gets fired, and he's been a guy who's had time in the past to build his scheme and his team in his likeness in Utah. And so I think you need to give him at least one off season and, maybe trade a few players, on the fringe and try to add a few players to contribute, especially on the defensive end. But I don't think I don't think I'm at the point where you trade Trae Young, especially because he's at the lowest of his value, I think he's ever been in his career. So I would take a step back from that right now, but some people have suggested it. Where are you at with that?
I get the reasoning too, in that the sense that you could just get so much for him. But you're right. I do think there's something about selling low now. And there's something about trading a guy who just got you to the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago as the main option. Like, he and DeJounte have only had one season together. And you're right. Quinn Snyder comes in halfway through the year. Like, a good coach like that who's earned the benefit of the doubt, because to me, he maxed that Utah team out. Like, I think he took them as far as they could go. I don't think coaching was the issue there. Yeah, I would like to see it have a chance. Like, if you come out next year and you're disappointing and you're kind of, in the same spot where you were, because I mean, this was a team that they had to battle their way into that 7 seed. It's not like they just flat out earned it. But if they come out and they're hanging around like 9, 10, 11, and they're kind of like in that fringe play-in position, then I think you maybe start to look at it where it's like, hey, have we just gone as far as we can with this roster? But I'm not at a point where, like, if you're going to trade Trae Young and you're going to blow the roster up that much, even if you're that low on Trae, and I get the reasons, like, I think he's going to be a net negative defender forever. I think he is disinterested sometimes when the ball is not in his hands, but I just don't trade players of that caliber unless I'm 100% certain that it's not going to work in any fashion. And I'm not there with Atlanta yet. I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. Not enough. Last year, that team was number 1 in offense. Like, now, granted, they gave a lot back on the defensive end. That matters too. But it's like, I don't know. I've seen what he can do in isolation. Like, I don't know. I don't get rid of guys like that unless I'm absolutely certain it's just over and you have to blow it up.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So going to 3-6 now. Sixers Nets. Sixers are up 3-0. Obviously, the big story is, I mean, this game is happening as we speak, but the big story is that Joel Embiid is not playing in game 4. He had an MRI on his knee. They said it was sprained. We'll see what else happens, but, Paul Reed getting the start there. Woj said that they're optimistic he could be back next week. The Sixers are clearly better than this Nets team. I mean, they played pretty much the worst half they could have played in game 2 and still won by 15 points. I thought they played horrible in game 3. I mean, frankly, they're lucky Embiid didn't get ejected, but then Harden did get ejected and they still found a way to win. Tyrese Maxey, absolutely incredible down the stretch. But I mean, again, this is what all that matters is Embiid's health. Like, I think this is one of the better Sixers teams that they fielded in a while. I think PJ Tucker is worth every penny. I think their depth has been surprisingly good so far between Jalen McDaniels stepping up and, a guy like D'Anthony Melton off the bench, who I think has been balling all year. They've gone small with him in some lineups. Paul Reed is probably the best backup center of the Embiid era, but it's already going to be a tough hill against Boston. I think the Sixers would rightfully be the underdog in any series against them. But if you have Embiid limited, let me just get it over with. There's no planet where they're going to win. Like, it's an impossible task.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that matters in the series, right? Because to a certain extent, I don't really consider this a playoff series. This is between regular season and playoffs, because Brooklyn knew coming in, there was no way they were going to win. They were going to try to give a good effort. You want to see what your guys look like in a postseason environment. You want to try to at least get one home win. And, for the most part, it's been cool to see Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson be the go-to guys in a playoff series, because that's not who they've been when they were in Phoenix. And you want to see if they can step into that role and you can build them on. But that doesn't matter in the landscape of the rest of the NBA. What matters in the landscape of the NBA is Embiid going to be healthy and going to be participating, because the next round is where the playoffs really start in the East, I think, at least for this team and for Boston and even Milwaukee, even though Giannis is hurt, because those are the 3 teams that make a difference, with Milwaukee fully healthy being right there at the top, with Boston and I think Philly just being slightly right below the other 2. If Joel's not healthy, it's over. Like, it's going to be fun to see if Tyrese Maxey can do that same sort of jump that we're looking at with Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. We're going to see if Harden can go back to being that go-to guy. Tobias Harris has been good for y'all, which is weird. You mentioned Paul Reed, and even though PJ Tucker's averaging 30 points a game, it feels like he's one of the best players on the floor every time you watch him play, which is ridiculous because he's like 80 at this point. It really the only thing that matters, the only conversation that matters, and it's a lame conversation because there's nothing we can actually talk about. But if Embiid's not healthy, that's the only thing that matters because you guys aren't going to beat Boston without him. You'll get through this series without him, but he needs to be on the court for you guys to win a championship or start, look like you have a chance to win a championship. And that's the only conversation that anyone really cares about.
Yeah, I mean and they have an opportunity today. I mean, they're down 7 at the end of first. The opportunity is there for them today if they're able to win this game without Embiid. Is just that you give yourself 10 days off. Like Atlanta beating Boston did the Sixers a world of good last night because that's another one. Like I thought that series might sweep, and then you're talking about them playing in just a significantly shorter amount of time. If Atlanta extends that, I think that only helps the Sixers. Like the more rest they can get for Embiid, the better. The same with Harden. But you're right. They don't have Harden is not MVP Harden. He hasn't been for a few years. We know this. He shoots the ball at a career high percentage this season. He's still, one of the better passers in the league. Like he's a great playmaker, but you just can't rely on his scoring enough. He doesn't his attempts in the paint this series have been abysmal. And it's only going to get worse against Boston. Again, they have the wings that they can really throw at you the way that Brooklyn does to kind of make your guard's life miserable.
Yeah, and especially with Boston, and I think this is something interesting because Maxi's obviously stepping up right now without Embiid.
Yeah.
But when they go against Boston, it's going to be what Trae Young has been dealing with for the most part in Atlanta. They're going to throw Brogdon and Tatum and Brown and Smart and Derek White at him, and they're not going to have a body that's not fresh, that's not capable of guarding him.
Yeah,
and it's going to and as much as both of us love Maxey, like he's not there right now to go against an elite defensive team that has 5 different body types to throw at him. That he can carry this team, and few guys are. They're really like Trae Young is an MVP level guy. He's been an MVP level guy multiple times in his career. And he's not being able to deal with it. I don't think Maxey's quite there yet. And I think he could have the potential to eventually get there.
Yeah.
Because he's so bouncy and he's so like
he will be. He's got it. Yeah. Kid's a star.
But he's not there yet. And that's my point. And there's probably 2 guys in the NBA that can deal with this Boston backcourt and really kind of carry a team offensively without much outlet anywhere else. It's going to be fun to see if that's the case, if Maxey can take that step up, because if he does, then this Philly team really kind of takes a step into a new stratosphere. If Maxey's that guy who's averaging 25 a game with Joel, who's averaging 30, and James, who's being the playmaker for that squad. But it's not there yet. And that's the issue with what we're looking at, because Boston's just so deep with defenders at that position.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, like you said, the Sixers' best case scenario is that they wrap this up early and just try to rest as much as possible or hope Atlanta wins, because they're going to need there are windows. Like, I don't think it's an impossible task for the Sixers to beat Boston. It's not, but if I'm running
healthy, it's a 51-49 matchup. I think
you feel better than I do. I'm glad you feel that way, because I don't.
Boston is a slight favorite. That's it.
Oh, dude, I think it's like 75-25.
Really?
If we're healthy, even if we're healthy. I do.
I
have to see it. Boston beats Philly all the time. Like, I don't want this to be true. I'm dying on the inside saying this, but it's just like I've seen this movie 20 times now.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think Philly is a more versatile offensive team than Boston.
They are.
Even though offensively is not necessarily the issue for Philly, it's more on the defensive side. I've seen Joel be a just complete monster on the defensive side. I've seen them able to anchor an entire defense around his ability to protect the paint. And if Boston's not shooting the ball well, which at certain times they have been throughout this run of these 2 guys as their core, there's a chance that you can sneak a game on the road and win your home games and get through that series if everyone's healthy. I think it's maybe 51-49 is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think it's more than 60-40 Boston.
Yeah, I mean, Boston, again, it's just their margin for error. I think their margin of error is way higher than the Sixers is. Like, when they have guys when the Sixers' top guys aren't going, they don't really have people that can step up. Where Boston just, I mean, like you mentioned it, they just throw so many different bodies at you. I also think as well. They just personnel wise, they are really well equipped. You mentioned the Maxey matchup and Harden. I think they're really equipped to make their lives miserable. And in the past, it's worked. Like Embiid has played well every game against Boston. It just doesn't really matter. It's what they did against Wilt back in the day. It's like, Wilt can have 70 points. Everybody else just isn't going to have any, and that's kind of what the mentality has been. And I mean, give Embiid a lot of credit for being able to take advantage. I mean, Al Horford used to just punk him all the time back
Yeah.
in the day. Like, give Embiid credit for making that matchup a little, but even on that front with Rob Williams, like they've got bodies to throw at you.
Yeah, no, they do for sure. I think we both have this with our favorite teams, and we'll talk about Arsenal, all the time. And it's you see all the flaws with your team at such a more magnified level,
For sure.
And that's probably the issue with you and Philly. And when I look at this Philly team, I'm like, this team has a higher ceiling than Boston. Like that's the thing. Like you look at the best players on it. Like I think Maxey can match Jaylen Brown in production, on both, obviously Jaylen Brown's a better defender, but Maxey's, I think, a better on offense. I think Joel Embiid has the potential to be a way better player than Jason Tatum. I think Jason Tatum can be a one-time MVP, almost guaranteed all-star player, whereas I think Joel can be like a 3-4 time MVP generational level talent. It's a question of health and, situation, that kind of stuff. But I just look at the entire roster. I'm like, I've seen James Harden be an MVP. I think Tyrese Maxey is a better offensive player than Jaylen Brown is defensive player. I think Joel Embiid can have a higher, a better career than Jason Tatum. I think, Doc Rivers is the same level coach as Joe Mazzulla. Like it's. I think the ceiling for this Philly team is higher than the Boston team. Maybe not this year, but moving forward. And then that's why I'm always a little bit more positive than you are when it comes to the Sixers versus the Celtics.
Yeah. I mean, I like your positivity. I'm just going to leave it on that note because I'm just going to be negative. So let's get into because the last series has been really positive in terms of being fun to watch, and that's Cleveland and New York. The Knicks are up 2-1. Obviously, a big win for the Knicks at MSG last night in some real 90s styles hoops. 99-79 score. Cleveland, good Lord. I mean, that was gross offensively from them. In a way, I think that'll make them feel better because it was so gross offensively that it's like you're not necessarily going to play as bad next game. But I mean, no, it's man, Cleveland's starters have disappointed me. Darius Garland had a really good game too, but he's in game 1 and game 3 looked pretty poor. Donovan Mitchell shot the ball badly in game 3. You know, the Knicks always were a little bit better from a depth perspective. Like that was your worry with Cleveland would be their depth, but their top guys just haven't delivered again, especially offensively, the way you hoped they would. I mean, they fully got rattled last night. Like they weren't even running in their offense. I mean, Mitchell Robinson, even afterwards in the game, kind of, trolled them a little bit, but like with Mobley, with Jared Allen, like they had nothing going inside. Mitchell Robinson just disrupting everywhere. Give the Knicks a lot. Obviously, they fed off that MSG crowd. Like that crowd is just always going to be amped up. And I think the vibes around this particular Knicks team are really high as well. They're super likable. But yeah, I mean, give it to Cleveland. You're gonna feel a little shell shocked now. Like they're fighting for their lives here. You can flip home court and come back and still have 2 or 3 in Cleveland, but you go down 3-1. I don't know. Like I was favored Cleveland in this matchup. I think they're the better squad, but I don't know if they're coming back from 3-1 against the Knicks. I don't think they have that in them.
This series really feels like what I wanted Phoenix and the Clippers to feel like. You know what I mean? This team on one side that has, these 2 really good guys with a lot of depth in the Clippers, and a team that's been put together for the first time this year with an extra superstar that's built on a core that's been pretty good before. Like Phoenix is with only like 4 or 5 real dudes that can play NBA minutes in the playoffs. And it feels like this is what I thought would happen if that was the case. I thought it would be, a Cleveland team would play guys. Like if you look at, this is the thing that's crazy to me, is you look at the minutes played, right? Cleveland's top 5 guys played 30, 31, 37, 38, 37, and 40 minutes apiece. So you're talking about Donovan Mitchell playing 40 minutes a game, Darius Garland playing 37 minutes a game, Mobley playing 37, and Jared Allen playing 38. And then you flip over to the to the New York side, and you have 10 guys, I think, playing more than 20 or more than is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys playing more than 20 minutes. You have Obi Toppins playing 15 minutes a game. And all of these dudes seem like they're contributing to the roster, even though it's unarguable that Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley are better than Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, and whoever that third guy is, RJ Barrett, whoever you want to call that third guy. But the fact is they have 10 dudes that can play playoff minutes, and Cleveland has 5-ish. And so and I would have loved to see that play out in Phoenix with higher level talent with KD and obviously those guys. But this series is going to be like that. It's going to be guys are going to have to step up on Cleveland and play these many minutes, and they're young and they can do that. But I think at the end of the day, I think New York will just outlast them, and then you have to factor in the fact that Thibs has been here and JB hasn't. and so that's going to be a big part of it. But at the end of the day, I think New York, they're going to be is going to be the difference here.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, you kind of feel good about a bounce back. Hopefully, like Darius Garland was 4 of 21 last night.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen again? I don't know. It happened in game 1.
He's playing 37 minutes a game, and we talk about Boston and their ability to throw bodies at you. Like New York might be the deepest team in the NBA. Like you talk about how many players they have that are legitimate NBA players. Like Quentin Grimes is their 10th guy. Like Mitchell Robinson is their third string big. Like that's, I don't know, like their second string big. Like that's just like, that feels like they just have too many dudes and too many bodies, and eventually it's going to wear down on a guy like Darius Garland, who's not the biggest dude.
No, and I mean, guarding these Knicks teams in general, I mean, guarding Julius Randle just looks exhausting with just the sheer physicality that he's been playing with. And I mean, that's something that Knicks fans have to be excited about. Like, this was can he bounce back from kind of a first poor playoff run? He has definitely so far. Cleveland moved Karis LeVert into the starting lineup for 3. I mean, he was really good in 2. I was a little bit surprised they went that route just because, I mean, like Okoro's been inconsistently offensively for sure, but he's confirmed good defensively. And I think that's somebody, I mean, Jalen Brunson really got, I mean, the Knicks shot poor, I guess, in the first quarter too, but it's like Brunson got going pretty early. And I feel like I want to match Okoro on Brunson as much as possible. Maybe they'll go back to that lineup for game 4 and it'll spark things a little bit. I just think Donovan Mitchell too has to be a little more assertive. Like, you're the best player on the floor in this series. Like, I just needed a little bit more out of him offensively. I think we'll get that in game 4. Like, I don't think he's going to come out as passive.
One of the most experienced guys in the playoffs as well.
I mean, he is on this Cleveland team. That's why they brought him in. Like, Cleveland, I know, were great in the regular season last year and they got into play-in position, but like, this is their first real run at it too. But you're right. I mean, this is a team that on paper, it certainly feels like the Knicks are deeper, but it feels like Cleveland's top guys should be asserting themselves a little more, and they just haven't so far. That said, I feel pretty good about a Donovan Mitchell bounce back game in game 4. I think this series could go the distance. It's a lot of fun.
7 games feels right, but I think at that 7th game, Cleveland's just gonna be so worn out by the Knicks depth, and they're gonna be more fresh and be able to rely on more dudes. So that's why I would lean the Knicks and probably 7. Yeah.
And I mean, you knew it made sense from a perspective fit wise, but that Josh Hart trade has been so good for the Knicks. Like, in terms of everything, I mean, and part of it is just, he's blended in well. I mean, obviously he and Brunson have history playing together in college, but it's like, wearing the Yankees logo in your braids and stuff like that. Like, Josh Hart's just been there, like, locker room energy vibes guy, really since coming over in the second half. Like, it's not just an X and O's impact. Like, it seems like has had a big difference in that locker room, and that goes a long way. Like, we talk about, I've said that with the Kings all year. Like, you can tell when these guys enjoy playing with each other, and it just makes things, you do the little things in the basketball court that help you win and play in playoff basketball when, you want to just go to war with your guys. You die for loose balls, you bang a little more down low, you fly out of bounds. Like, these are just the plays that it feels like the Knicks make. And you can see it. I mean, you definitely saw in the Garden last night, like, those fans are turned up. A lot of people
nothing more fun than a playoff game in New York.
No, New York City will burn down if the Knicks ever win a title. And I don't want to say ever, because I guess they've won in the past, but like, if the Knicks break the drought, like, it will truly be one of the greatest parades of all time. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm going if that happens. Like, it's going to be cathartic. Like, it'll be the way it was in Philly when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, only it's in Manhattan. And so there's 5 times more people than there is in Philly. And oh, by the way, that's the one city, again, no offense to Brooklyn, but it's like, that's the one team in the city that everybody roots for. Hockey split, baseball split, football split. It's not split like that with hoops. Like the Knicks are without a doubt the top dogs in the city.
Yeah, and I think one thing that would make that, we get even closer is the fact that there are these Villanova guys. I say we petition the NBA to get DiVincenzo and Archidiakono on this team, because if those two dudes are on this team with Josh Hart, with Jalen Brunson, they're winning the title.
I mean, look,
Get Jay Wright out of retirement too.
Shout out to Jay Wright. He's enjoying retirement. He went back to Hofstra the other day. Hofstra God for life. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Driving Dish NBA podcast. Shout out to Sam for rocking out with me an hour 20. Love it. Love it getting going the distance here a little bit on this podcast. So, Spartanburg Herald-Journal reporter for Sam. Make sure you check out his Big J journalism work. Follow him on Twitter at Sam B. Albuquerque. Justin will be back next week. Y'all know the drill, where you can find the podcast, watch it on YouTube, subscribe, like us on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify. Look, we're everywhere you can find a podcast at this point. Before I get out of here, because you got the jersey on, we're not going to dive too deep into it, but Arsenal, of course, in a Prem title race right now. It's going to come down to Arsenal and City. Arsenal control their own destiny. If you're watching the stream, you can tell by Sam's face that he's not felt good about this the entire time and still doesn't feel good about it. Let me get a temp check. How are you? Let's go. I mean, this can still happen, right?
Yes, we technically control our own destiny, but we have to beat City. We have to beat them. We can't draw. We can't lose. We have to beat them, or they have to drop points, which is possible because they're still in 3 different competitions, which is insane. But in my mind, if we don't beat City, even if we win the title and we don't beat them, we're not champions. Like
Sam,
dude, City's a better team.
Who cares if you win? Who cares?
I don't know, man. I don't feel good. This team gave me hope, and that's the one thing I knew I shouldn't have let happen. Throughout this entire time, and I've sent, I think, multiple videos on Instagram about like people who have gotten hope, and like it's like these funny Instagram videos about being an Arsenal fan and having hope and how you hate it. It's like, if we have hope and we're in first, then we're not going to win, but we have to be in second, close to first, without any hope, and then we surprise people. The thing is, this team's gone wire to wire as pretty much the number 1 team in the Prem all season.
Yeah.
And it's developed a really just happy moment for us as an Arsenal fan group. It's so hard to watch when you play Southampton, you go down 3-1, and it's just like, we're gonna lose to the last place team in the Prem right now. And then obviously it's great that they fought back and we were able to tie 3-3, and you love to see that kind of heart, but like, we can't let that stuff happen.
Yeah. It's stressful because your margin of error is gone. Like, you just have to play perfect, and you know that you've got a demon in Man City on your tail. Like that's tough. I get that, but don't give me that. We're not the best team if we don't beat City. The Eagles would have beat the Patriots 20 times in that Super Bowl, but they only beat them once, and that's all that matters.
But that's the difference. Like, playoffs, it's in the NFL, even in the NBA, it's like, it's single elimination. It's, you have to go through the teams in front of you. Like, when you play soccer, it's as simple as, and you play everybody in the league twice, and whoever has the most points win. If we lose, the only team we lose to twice in the entire season is the second place team, and that second place team is Man City, and they're a point behind us, and they won the Champions League and they won the FA Cup. It's like, are we actually better than them, or did we just have less games, period, because we weren't in those competitions? Because we got lucky somehow throughout the season. Like, it's a little part of me is not going to love it. It will obviously, I might just throw that all out because I'll be, mentally insane at that point. But, me in my right mind right now is feels a little like, if we don't beat City, it's not a complete title. It's missing a little bit.
Okay, I think that's insane because it means you ran the gauntlet the entire year. But I'll let you get that. Like, I understand what you're saying. I think that's insane, and I think you should be enjoying every second of it and never doubt your own. Championships don't come very often.
You're gonna tell me you watched 85 minutes of that Southampton game and it was enjoyable? It wasn't. I'm
not saying it's enjoyable, but if you win, it's enjoyable.
I was yelling up a storm in my living room watching the last, the last 8 minutes, and it wasn't fun. I feel like my heart might go. Hope
stinks, because so when you think you can actually win and then you don't, it's really tough. Like that is, bro. Like, dude, like, yeah, I was miserable when the Eagles lost the Super Bowl this year. Like, I didn't really express it on the podcast, but like, I was confirmed miserable for 3 weeks, and in a way, like, because I thought they were going to win. We're like, that was the thing in 2017 where it was like, I didn't think they had any chance. Granted, we had never won before and it ended in an existential crisis, but it was like, you know, the expectations weren't there. I knew the Eagles could win that Super Bowl and still in my heart of heart believes that they could have won that Super Bowl. But, you know, that's just how it goes sometimes.
What if it ends up happening that we finish in second, which to me is more likely than not at this point. I think we're going to be in very similar places with our, favorite teams. Me, Arsenal being my favorite team, you with the Eagles, is that everybody's gonna be like, but look how great your young core is, and you have this guy, you with Jalen Hurts, we have Saka and Odegaard and Martinelli, those guys, and be like, you guys, the future is bright. It's like, yeah, but like we were this close. We're this close, and breaking through just gives you so much more confidence. It builds up this this moment, especially with you had it with that 17 team where they broke through and finally won a title for the first time in Eagles history. It's been since the early 2000s and since Arsenal's won a Premier League title, we've been hanging on FA Cups for about for about 3 years now, and it's so it's I don't know, man. It's tough. It's a really good moment, and when you have some perspective and you take a step back and you look at what we accomplished and what we're expecting this year, it's a success. But when you have hope and you're this close, it's so hard to have that perspective.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. It's tough because you realize as you get older too, you realize deep down that there's only so many amount of chances. Like you can assume these chances are going to come, but they may not. Like you just you never know. Sports more than anything, especially the NBA, can change on a dime, as I'm sure we'll see this off season. Thank you guys again. Justin will be back next week.